Hi, everybody. Welcome to Facebook Live tonight. I am Joanne with Fur Better, Fur Worse Dog Training.
And I'm Lisa Bataska with Canine Defined.
So I told Lisa this one was going to be mostly her tonight because we're going to talk about day school and day training, benefits or negatives around that stuff. And I have to tell you, at least where I live, I was joking with Nancy. She's traveling, so she couldn't join us tonight. I said nobody does that here. Like they do daycare. We're board and train. Um, so nobody really does a take your dog to school kind of thing and drop them off. And when Lisa started doing it, I had so many questions like, well, what do you do every day, and how do you handle it, and how many dogs do you take, and all those things. So I found it super interesting that she took that on. So, yeah, Lisa, do you want to talk about what you do? Just in a
I think, so the day school has more to do with actively having a structured day for the routine for the dogs and stuff like that to get them to deal with training, but then also enrichment and then also socialization around other dogs, provided it's appropriate. I think the hardest part about this, it's not daycare. Like there's a difference. Daycare is more of like, I don't know, at least the impression I get is more dogs running around playing with each other without uh, um, interaction with people as much. And they spend the entire day doing that. And so for me, that wasn't appealing to me because I didn't feel that was the most healthy outlet for dogs. I felt it was more, they needed more structure. Like I think a lot of dogs don't, they thrive in that. So, and it was something that you have to like training dogs. You have to like understanding dogs. You have to like working with dogs to be able to figure out who they are, what works for them. The other aspect of it is you have to convey that information to their owners because if their owners can't get it, then that's a whole nother story, right? So there's a lot of pieces to it. And I think most of the time with day training, the difference in terms of staffing is important, right? So, like for staffing for day care, there's limited. Although I don't believe it's appropriate. I think anybody who deals with dogs has to know how to read body language to prevent issues and so forth. And in daycare, it appears that the dogs are left to their own devices. In my experience that I've seen, and for me, it's more about helping provide them structure. So I think a lot of daycare they don't put them in crates to time them out or have downtime, and it's a free for all through the day. At least that's been my overall experience with that program. And I didn't care for that for what I do because I think it's dogs learn regardless of where they are in their age to be able to understand how to interact socially and then also respond to people during that time too.
mm-hmm.
So for me, like when we work with dogs, it's important to have impulse control. They're learning how to like hang out in crates with other dogs working, not having FOMO, just a variety of things with that. So
Speaking of FOMO,
yeah. Yeah.
so and I'm not knocking all daycares, right? But the other thing that I have found too, right, is there are some here that actually do crate dogs, right? They'll notice if they need a break or they're starting to get a little overexcited or humpy or pushy. Um, and I think this will go to even day school or day training too, right? I mean, like I trust Lisa pretty implicitly. I've known her for gosh, almost 20 years now, haven't I? 15 at least.
Something.
Long time.
Long.
And just based on our conversations, right? We look at dogs very similarly and we believe in a lot of the same things and what dogs should have and the structure they should have. But if you leave your dog somewhere, right, and you don't know or trust that person, you don't know what you're being told. Okay. And I will just tell you, I know when I in my 20s, right? When I sent my dogs to daycare, uh oh yeah, they did great. They had a really good time today, blah blah blah. Well, a friend of mine lost her job and started working at that daycare just until, in job transition, and she told me, she said, one of your dogs sits by the door and guards the leashes and the other one sits under a chair all day. And I was like, oh, so clearly they're not enjoying themselves. And I pulled them out right away. But, going there for a couple of months and not getting that feedback. And so what I was told was the owner said, don't you tell any clients that their dogs have any issues. Everyone did great. Everyone had a good time. And if there's any like altercations or things that we have to explain that we can't hide, I will talk to them. You don't get to answer any questions, right? Which is scary.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of fights, more so now, but um
Well, we spent a lot of time understanding the dogs, right? So, like when I first get a dog in, so I've had requests for dog reactive dogs or stuff like that. And I inquire very deeply about who that dog is, what they look like, how they play with other dogs, and so forth to determine whether or not it's appropriate. And I'll do assessment prior to like try to figure out if this is an appropriate program for your individual dog. Because I think a lot of times it's flooding, right? Go in, deal, figure it out. And to me, that's not safe, fair, or appropriate for all dogs. There are some dogs that are okay with it, but other dogs do not have that flexibility because they've not been exposed to it. So I do prefer, we get a lot of like puppies and teenagers. The adult dogs seem to run out of it, right? It's not the same. Once a dog's reach social maturity between 2.5 and 3 years old, it's different. They're more inclined to do their own thing, that people are more happy with him because they understand the routine. They're adults, so it doesn't require as much effort on our part to like guide the dog. But when they're puppies and teenagers, it requires a lot of effort. And so for me, when I look at day school type of training or day training, it is more of us helping guide the dogs and providing them with appropriate opportunities to figure who they are out. Because like we're not going to jump on them if they have an interaction, but if they have an interaction with another dog, we assess and we are aware of who that is, and then we adjust accordingly. So it's not like all dogs are out at once because we can't do that. It's not safe or fair to everybody, right? So I guess like anytime we experience issues, like, so there's a dog, a couple of dogs, but they're teenagers. All of a sudden they're feeling their oats. You're like, you can't do that. To the other dogs, I'm like, oh, you can't do that. That's not right. So it becomes more of a like we are guiding, and we're like the playgroup monitors, right? Like trying to adjust and help intervene when we need to and redirect. And I think that's what's missing with day school or day training. There's not a lot of that, and you have to read body language to understand where the dog is, what's going on with them, and know how to adjust it. So, and the problem is that those people that are handling day school are not up to that par or level to understand how to read dogs, right? Because it takes many years to understand how to read a dog and figure that piece out. Like, right? It's and I err on the side of caution. I'm like, okay, yep. Let's pull this dog out and let's try to put it with a different dog that's a little less forward. So,
yeah. And to counter that too, we can all, you can all see the end result, right? If the dog is like, and kind of goes or snarks or, worse, goes after a dog. But I think that skilled eye is also protecting those dogs who are being flooded, that are not reacting, but they're more shut down. Right. So I know I had a client when the dog came in to class, right? And of course, we had partitions and we had given the dog its own space, and the dog was very kind of fear reactive. So when another dog would look at it or get too close, rah, 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 rah. And you know, they were like, "Oh, it's fine. He goes to daycare all the time." And it's like,
It's not fine.
what? And so, you know, I ended up creeping around and I found some pictures in daycare and I see, you know, when the dog's in a photo, it's just a photo. So I've met the dog in person and I'm interpreting a photo, which I could be wrong. I'll give you that because photos only show you what you have in the moment.
Yep.
But right there's like two dogs on this side and the dog's like, you know, you get all
Eyes,
of
body,
those,
like, yeah, yeah. Yep.
moving away and you know, a lot of times, especially in the summer, let's be fair, you get high school kids or college kids who are gonna, you know, take summer jobs and kind of do that stuff where you're lucky if you get somebody who can remotely read a dog. If you can, it's great. I know they do exist, but
But I also think you're paying for a service, right? So if you're
yes,
paying for that service and it's a little more pricier than you want or what you think is what it is, like it is because the people that are covering that are experienced,
yeah,
right? Versus like so I've heard of uh, places that'll use like hoses to spray down dogs to stop them from fighting or just a variety of things, and I'm like, that's too much. But they're also having like 20 some odd dogs in a play group all day long. I have never been about that. It's just not safe. It's not feasible. It's too high stress consistently for dogs and for the people to constantly monitor that. So for me, it's like I would rather have smaller groups and help the dogs feel comfortable. So, for example, my own dog, Mick, who's now 4 months old. When I first got him, I went to Canada to pick him up. And we had two incidents with other dogs. I noticed he barked at the two dogs in two different situations. One was when we were getting his soft-sided crate to put him in to fly in the airline, and a dog was at the store it was a Pet Supplies Plus, for example, and he saw the dog, and the dog was like, "Hey," and the owner's like, "Can you say hi?" And my dog was not comfortable, and I saw that. And he barks at the dog, "Whoa," right? Kind of I don't know about this. And I'm like, that's okay. I go, no, we're good. Thanks. So I just ignored and moved on. Then I noticed it in the airport when another dog came in to go potty in the special potty area for puppies or dogs or animals. And he barked. And I'm like, interesting. So I happened to mention it to the breeder. But because I was observant of that, I'm like, are we going to have issues with this? Because I need to know like what to do. You don't have to love other dogs, but I do want you to be okay in the presence of them. And so we worked, and so I talked to the breeder, and the breeder was like, well, he did have an incident. Something happened. I noticed it. It was notable because I thought he would recover quicker or whatever the case was. And so it was on my radar. So then when I put him out, I had to be really careful with who he interacted with and where it was enough, but not too much of him to be flexible in terms of startle and then recovery, right? And I think that's what people don't understand. Like most people are about, oh, let them sort it through, let them figure it out. And I'm like,
yeah. I mean, putting that like when you talk the day training, right, versus daycare, day school, whatever. I kind of think about it like this, right? You have the after school program with like, you know, the certified teachers who are arts and crafts time and we're
right,
supervising and, you know, nobody's left to their own devices versus I'm going to drop you off at the skate park. Be
right,
back in 2 hours, you know, where no one's really watching you. And as a youngster or an adolescent, which is even worse, to try and like make your own decisions and we'll hope you make the right one.
right.
Um, I think, you know, you've heard us talk a lot about patterns and predictability. And when you think about how many hours a day you're working with your dog versus if you leave them somewhere, you know, for 8 hours a day, what are they practicing when you're not around?
Right.
And some of that is maybe the people there are skilled people, but, you know, it's more of a we're going to play with dogs type of thing. If they are like Lisa's dog, right? A little worried, like I might bark at a dog or let's say there's balls out, right? And my dog is like plays with a ball all day long, all day long, all day long. And if you have a herding breed, right, you can start to create some OCD, some
Yep.
really non-desirable behaviors,
Right.
letting the dogs just practice things over and over again that don't have value to their brain.
Hmm.
Um, and once they practice those, this is what we do, right? It's what we do all day. This is what I start to do at home. Now I'm ball obsessed. Now I'm, afraid of other dogs or, whatever it is. So, just something to think about. And this is where it gets hard too, because most of the time when you want to send your dog out, it's because they're young, they're full of energy, adolescents suck, right? They're pushy, they're testing, right? That's when it's their big butthead stage. So that's the moment where you're like, I just want to come home from work and have my dog be tired so they're not a pest all night long. But again, what are you building for the rest of their lives? Because like Lisa mentioned earlier, once a dog's 3-4 years old, they may enjoy a day of play, but it is definitely not in the same way.
Right.
And you sort of think about it, right? Like, what did you do in your teens and 20s? Do you still enjoy that level of radical activity now? Some people still do, but a lot of us don't. We've sort of chilled out a little bit, right?
Hmm. Yeah, and I think yes, it's a good point. And to like back up some of there was a specific situation. I remember it was a border collie, right? Already prone to like very OCD type of stuff. And to exercise the dog, they were using a laser light.
Mm.
Yeah, right. And not just a laser light. It was a laser light on concrete. So the dog ended up developing a shoulder issue, and then and so forth. And I'm like, I happened to notice it because I was watching the dog for the person. I'm like, since when did this happen? And so it was interesting. And I'm like, you can't do that. That's not appropriate. It's, and I'm super careful because I have herding breeds. So I know how prone they are to being ridiculous about one thing if you allow them to herd it, right? So, but it was interesting. Like, and that's the other thing. Like, when you opt for a program like this, the program should be supplemental to your training. You know what I mean? In compliance with what you're doing. You're kind of looking for more information about who your dog is and how to help them. And that's what we train our eyes to do, because impulse control for puppies and then teenagers is something that we work on very carefully. But we also are very cognizant of who the dog is in terms of, are they able to handle it? Oh, guess what? Today you can't maybe wait until I release you out the crate. Okay, we're gonna adjust things a little bit, right? And I think that's the difference with a skilled eye and trainers that work in this specific capacity to understand like who this individual is, how to adjust accordingly, and so forth. But truly, day training and day school is more about helping support your training or providing them a more uh, routine, productive outlet, right? Because during my program, what we do is we work on training. We work on every interaction is very, very orchestrated in terms of you still have to have a brain. You get to play with dogs, and you still have to call out a play for them. I mean, those are more excelled or advanced type of skills because not all dogs can do that, right? Especially when they're around. And I have a few who are like, yeah, we love dogs. And I'm like, ugh, it's so hard, right? When those dogs are like, I can't call off of another dog. I'm like, things we need to work on, put it on the checklist. And then we also provide support to clients about like if they're missing things or if, hey, this is what you want to work on and stuff like that. It just kind of depends on who the individual is and catering to that individual need, which I think is a very nuanced situation for day school or day training type of situation versus day care. Daycare is different. And even board and trains are different, right? I mean, when I take a board and train dog into my home, um, it is very structured. It doesn't mean you don't get to have fun, but there are rules to it. So if your dog is not consequences are a thing. So, and consequences are relative to the individual based upon like what's happening, right? And I don't know if that's something that is dwelled upon or pointed out during daycare for dogs.
Yeah. So let me ask you, because I know you have a particular skills that you sort of run through every day with the dogs, and enrichment things that you do while they learn to be in a crate, and life skills, right? Um, so I guess first question: do you get a lot of adult dogs, or are they primarily adolescents and under?
Primarily adolescents and under,
Okay.
because that's when they're the hardest. Let's
Yeah.
let's be honest. Like I tell people, give me your puppy, I'll put a good foundation on it. But teenagers are tougher. Like they
Yeah.
require a lot more repetition, they require a lot more redundancy, and they require a lot more directed structure than most dogs. And then once they hit adult time, they're not as bad. I mean, they're not as like you're like, and that's when we remember them the most, right? That's why we get dogs again. Oh, remember this dog? And like, oh,
Where I can't remember what it was like when I had a puppy. Why did I get another
right,
puppy?
right. And
Yeah.
so that's the thing, right? It's like, give me your puppies. They're easy. I love them. I do. I love training a puppy over a teenager. The teenagers are a little more challenging, I think, not just for the average person, but for anybody working with them.
Sure. So, also, like, if I was to drop off a dog, right, and I said, "Hey, we're really struggling with this. Can you spend some time?" Do you accommodate people like that? Like, if I tell you I'm having a particular problem, will you spend a little more time on that?
Yes. So
Okay.
so it was interesting. So we had a teenager, and it was a young female Aussie who didn't have the best start. The Aussie, this puppy was a little worried, very worried and stuff like that, and then was put on medication because they lived in an apartment to help subdue the behaviors. But the problem was the pup was very scared of life because it didn't have a lot of exposure or point of reference. So we took her on, and then recently, and she's been doing really good. Like she's a smart dog. It took her a bit to trust, blah blah blah. We work through it, and it takes time. And I think that's the ultimate thing about dogs. Like most people need to understand, they are. It takes time to raise a dog.
Hmm.
Like there's no quick fix to it. Like there's no quick fix to people, right? Like how do we expect a species that speaks our own language to like respond immediately to our requests and then have the same criteria for a different species that doesn't even speak our language? Is to me it's absurd. So anyway, for this particular dog, fine, everything was going well, blah blah blah. Recently they're like, hey, she's been showing teeth and so forth, and mind you, she's a teenager, a full-blown teenager, Aussie female at that. And so I was like, okay, fine, we'll work it. So we try to work it and stuff like that, give advice about how to handle it at home. The dog does not exhibit it with us, but and is not exhibiting it with specific people in the family, but only certain ones. So I'm like, well, you guys got to keep me posted. Let me know if somebody is having a specific issue with certain things going on. Then we need to like understand that and then adjust our tactics. So I took the dog, I threw all the things that they have issues with this dog out on the floor and said, okay, can you pay attention to me? Absolutely. Sure I can. But I think that's the important piece of it, right? The relationship that I build with a dog is far different than the people they live with,
Hmm.
right? And so and even as a trainer, like seeing a dog weekly, they're like, oh my gosh, it's so and so. She gives me tons of cookies. I love her. It's great, blah, blah, blah. But then I go home with this fool and we don't get as many cookies and stuff like that, right? And I think there's something to that. Like, I get it. I'm the same way. Like, I don't treat my puppy every single time they do certain things. But we also have to keep that in the back of our mind because that will affect our relationship and our predictability and structure and routine with that individual, right? So Anyway, so that's kind of, yes, we do accommodate certain things, but at the same time, it's not a one size fits all. It's not a permanent fix because dogs take time to grow mentally,
Mhm.
physically, and everything. I mean, we have this pit. I'm sorry, what is he? A Rottweiler. Haven't seen him in a while. He is strong. He is one strong boy, right? So I took him out in the yard. We were playing. He got to play with another dog. He was so excited and stuff like that. And then we took her away because she couldn't handle. She was like, "Oh my gosh." I'm like, "Okay, we need a break, right? Too much." And I'm like, "You stay right here." And he listened to me because he was tired from playing, but he listened. And he's like, "All right, can you sit?" "Yeah, I can sit." "Cool. Can you down?" And then he's like, "I can down." Oh my God, that was great. I loved it because he missed that social interaction, right? And he was a really good boy, but oh my gosh, pulling is the worst thing for him, right? He's terrible at it. So we try to affect what we can and then try to find ways to help people understand how to help those issues that may or may not be temporary based upon the history of what the dog's been allowed to rehearse.
Yeah. And that's where all of our conversations around training versus management come in, right? Especially with
Mhm.
adolescents. I'm going to manage what I can't train because you're not doing those things, right? Not going to allow you to practice those behaviors. So go ahead. You're going to say something?
No, go ahead.
Oh, so and I know too, like Lisa puts, this is what I love. She puts a ton of videos out on like what she does every day. And it's really interesting to watch all of these, and you just sort of see the dogs get it, and you can see different levels of dogs. Like I love it when she kind of pans the crates, and you can see like the newer dogs to daycare or to day training. They're like
I
just
don't.
really trying to hold it together, and the other ones that are like just
We get
relax.
it.
Tell
It's
us.
time to chill. Yeah, yeah. It is funny. It's interesting. Like it depends. And I try to mix up the schedule just because I want the dogs to have different experiences. And every day is different, right? And it's based upon the individual we have in front of us. Like, oh, well, this is so and so. They have a problem with wanting to greet all the dogs. Therefore, let's figure out how to address that, right? And so we do a lot of distraction training and so forth, and then recording it and sending it to the owners to see this is how you want to handle this. And it is extreme. So day training and day school is more of a providing you with opportunities in controlled setting, controlled chaos, right? Kind of like classes, but the difference is that you have an experienced handler on the end of the leash, right? Versus, oh my God, my dog is staring, or I'm listening to the handler, to the instructor, but my dog is staring, and then my dog pops off. How did that happen? And that's the thing I think is interesting. And the thing I like about day school is that we help plant or place some sort of foundation on the dog based upon what their need is, right? And let's be honest, it's all pretty the same thing. Can you split attention? If I add distraction, how are you with this? You know what I mean? And so, and we adjust. So, like, I'm not going to place a dog with a super excitable dog versus a dog who, like, I'm thinking of a dog who wants to play with all dogs. I'm not going to put that dog in that situation because that's going to set the other dog up that wants to interact with the other dogs, the newbie, so to speak. Hey, how are you? Let's talk. And the other dog's going to have, right? And so that's the other thing about it is like, how do you mix and match appropriate dogs to help them learn the information that you're trying to convey to them, right? So, but they get downtime. We do things like sniffy walks or any kind of enrichment to help them unwind and relax. And it varies throughout the day. I like to mix it up because it just depends. We also do I have some sound. I have a sound machine for them, box fans or whatever it is to try and help them to have a moment to rest and relax because I think that's sorely missing in any kind of program with dogs where you have them for the day because they need to learn how to be
Mm.
quiet and then also rest, right? Because rest consolidates memories. So to me, that's even though it's not entirely what we want, but at the same time, and we mix it up. Like sometimes we'll train first, or sometimes we'll play first, depending on the weather. Like this past week, we had kind of terrible weather. So everybody ran out and played in the yard. And then we put them up and they were like, cashed out, right? And I'm like, okay, we'll take a break now. And then we'll work them a bit. And we mix it up and we determine, oh, is this dog better with playtime in the morning versus the evening? So it's constant monitoring, which I think is something that, that's not something you can ask just anyone to do. They have to care. Like they have to care. So.
Yeah, Tim says he's never been a fan of board and train daycare too, trying to find a positive owner not present. Yeah, I mean, and I said that earlier though, Tim, right too. It's like if I don't know you, and to put my young minded dog that is just so available for bad things to happen, right, in the hands of somebody I don't know, it's really hard, right? Because I mean, I don't know about any of you guys watching, like I just don't think it's out there. Like I'm loving what Lisa does. I know Nancy has a similar program where it's kind of like, what do you want your dog to learn today? And I know she does some of that. You missed the beginning. No problem. We're glad to have you now. But trying to find how do I know who to trust? And I know we've done a Facebook Live on that, but again, right, I'm sure Lisa would be, if somebody said, I want to see what you do, can I come? Right?
Absolutely. But I think all of us are the same way. It's like, you want to know what we do and how we work, come to a class, take a look. There's no problem with understanding that. I don't have any secrets, other than it just takes time and patience and
sometimes
consistency.
It's like watching paint dry.
It is. It totally is, right? Because you're like, oh my gosh. I mean, we have a dog who comes and I'm like, oh, she's taken so long. And she's had such big improvement. But at the same time, we're like, wow, remember when? And we as trainers have to realize that because it's been some time with that particular individual. But to answer Tim's, or kind of address some of Tim's concern in regards to board and train, give me your puppy. I will lay a foundation and then convey that to you. But I am not the typical board and train.
Yeah, I was going to say, you only take puppies, don't you?
I mostly take puppies. Teenagers are harder because truly in a puppy, 2 to 3 weeks, we can install some good behaviors, right? And help them understand a specific routine. Potty training, attention and focus, good socialization, how to understand the rules of the house and stuff like that. Some of those come pretty well. However, they have to transition. And that's, I think, the trick to board and trains, right?
Yeah.
Transitioning over to the owner. And so when I do board and trains, I'll send videos about what we've worked on, what we do, how we work it, and how they need to do it. I also offer in-home privates along with my board and train to be able to like support the training, whatever it is. And then the other part is that like day school is a supplemental training. It's not to replace your training. Mm-hmm. But I do believe all training is not to replace your training regardless, right? The board and trains are kind of a quick start guide, like, the quick start up on the, whatever it is program to kind of get the dogs rolling. But it's not an end all fix all or be all. It just isn't, because there's always maintenance to it, regardless of the type of technique you utilize, right? And the problem with the teenagers at that point, I don't take teenagers because they take a lot longer than 3 weeks to complete a board and train, right? It takes them longer, and it is relative to the individual, right? Some dogs are so, like I've had a dog that is so dog social that he loses his mind around dogs. So that was our priority in terms of trying to work with him. And it was difficult and very frustrating, I'm not going to lie. But and it's not that you can't be done, but it requires more savvy and what's the word I'm looking for? Less access to freedom than people are willing to give, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you have to have super amount of structure, and then the dog earns the the freedoms to it. But as a puppy, the puppies don't know the difference. So you have a clean slate to work, but not a clean slate, but something that isn't polluted with other ideas, right? Versus with teenagers, they're like, yeah, yeah, and they're already at a very difficult age to accept learning just based upon biologically what's going on with them, right? So that makes it more tricky. And so that case, I prefer to work more independently with the owners to say we need to adjust this, we need to adjust that, more direct in a specific individual basis versus I'm going to take your dog and work it.
So just on a personal question note, right? How many times, since I know you do take the young puppies mostly for board and train, right? Like, have you had some repeat, come back, come back, come
Yes.
back?
Yes, I have.
And is
Yeah,
it really
because
just owners can't keep up with what you're doing? Yeah.
yes, most of the time it has to do with that. If they do a repeat, it's because they're like, "Hey, we need more support." Or I had one who was a toy breed ish, and they weren't paying attention. They gave it too much freedom, right? Because they think, and I'm like, look, by no means is your dog trained after 2 weeks. Even as a puppy, you still have to do the work. Like, I'm helping set behaviors to help you get better at them, but you still need to do this, this, and this, right? And so on occasion, I've had that where they've come back, but it's not frequent because for the most part, it's like, it's an investment of money and time, right? So I'm like, let's not waste it because I appreciate your time and I'm sure you appreciate your own money. Like, let's be real with that. So
Well, based on how many people don't fulfill a 6-week obedience class,
I know. And so that's
I'm
why
not sure people value their own money, but
and that's why I'm super selective, right? Because look, I'm not,
sure.
you know, as much as money is great and makes the world go round, it's not the end all be all in terms of when I'm working with dogs, right?
Yeah, right.
And and I think that's what people don't understand. It's like some people are like, oh, you get to play with dogs all day. I'm like, you don't understand like what it's like to play with other people's dogs. Like everybody has different requirements. So like my requirements for my dogs is very different. My husband's like, oh my gosh, your dogs are so good. I'm like, I know because I want them a specific way. Now, that doesn't mean everybody else shares that same sentiment or same routine or anything like that. So I think that's the piece that people don't understand. Like, no, I get it, and I sympathize, and I want to do all the right things by the individual dog. But at the same time, it can't be about the money, right? Because if it's about the money, then you lose the quality.
Yeah,
I'm
then you'd be
sorry,
taking multiple dogs instead of
right.
spending your time on one, right?
Right.
Or
And
two.
I'm super critical. Like, I don't want to take more than one because it's
Hmm.
a lot of time and energy. And like, I lose sleep at night because I'm like, did I do enough? Am I doing okay? And, is this dog getting, what do we need to work on? And what do I have to focus on? What do I need to videotape? I do take it. And they live in my home. It's not a facility. They live in my home and I work with that individual dog. So, yeah, it's something that is like if you're doing it, it's kind of like, and honestly, like I might get into another topic here, but breeding, like if you're doing it right, it should be more painstaking, wanting to do the right thing than money making, quite
Hmm.
honestly, right? I value and I take serious that people put dogs in my trust to help them and to do the best I can to help raise them to get them where they need to be. And every
Hmm.
dog is different. So, and nobody's perfect. They have dogs. I have dogs who I'm like, oh, they're a bit naughty today. One dog, he's been coming to us forever. He's a pup. Now he's feeling really good because he had some health issues. And now he's a bit more sassy with other dogs. I'm like, well, I didn't see that coming. So we will need to adjust that situation for him. So,
Yeah. I don't know. So I'm just curious. Like Tim, I know you're on the East Coast, I believe, right? So I'm just curious, is anyone that's watching, have you heard outside of Lisa or Nancy, anyone that does kind of a day school where it's very structured and the dogs are learning as opposed to getting dropped off and having a play date. Because I was said to Nancy, I said, this topic's interesting because definitely around here we don't do it right. If you're going to drop them off for training, it is a board and train, right?
Mhm.
It might be a daytime board and train, but it is strictly obedience and that sort of thing. I don't see a lot of people teaching life skills. So I was just really curious about it. And Nancy said, no way. There's people. I was like, I don't know of anybody besides you two that do it that way. So I was just
I
really
know.
curious.
There was a group, I don't remember where they were, I think in Indy or somewhere a little more south, that did just puppies for day school. They
Okay.
took them, they worked them, they did all the stuff. They had a van and took them to different places to work on skills and stuff like that, which is kind of my end goal. But initially, they have to, the dogs have to first care that you exist and don't have environmental issues and form a bond of trust before you actually take them into that environment. So, here's one. Amy Barth, Think Positive, and Waukesha, Wisconsin has one that includes exercise like water treadmill, swimming, and land treadmill, as well as walks and training.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
WDI does weekly classes, but owner is involved. Yeah, and I think with the day training, it's supportive training. It's not to replace what you do in class or how you live your life with your dog, right? And that's the difference. And like to me, classes are proofing, are a matter of getting behaviors and then proofing in a chaotic, how can I say this, a constructive or predictable chaotic environment, right? To some degree, because the dogs have to learn those skills.
Yeah.
And I guess it's different, like where I'm at, and the benefit I have in terms of how I've come where I am today is that I kind of check people out, like, let's see what works for you. Okay, this is what I would do first. Then I might go into school, might go into a class, or I might go into day school. It just depends on the individuals. Oh boy, there's some talking. So I think that,
Sassy Papillon.
yeah, sassy boy, gotta yell about it. So yeah, I think it's totally, stepping stone, day school. Yeah, Julie Sean's Stepping Stone Day School. Yes, Barbara, that's who it was, I think. And they were pretty good with that. So
Closed now. See, that's the
yeah,
problem is like, right, there's not a lot of money when you and again, like Lisa said, it's not necessarily about the money, but to try and make a living,
yes,
right? If you're doing day school during the day and training dogs at night, that's exhausting to
yep,
keep up with over a long period of time. So it's like, to try and make a living on that alone is rough.
it is because right, and yes, it can be depending on what you charge a day and depending on how many dogs you take, right? And then again, there's a quality control issue, so you can't have a gazillion dogs and then only have one trainer to deal with it. You have to have an appropriate amount, and skilled trainers can handle more dogs, right? It totally depends on the situation. And as far as it not being, it can be profitable to some degree, but to do it right, it's different. It is just is. And even with teaching classes, from teaching classes to privates to board and trains, when you sit down and look at the benefits of the types of things you run and what you run and what the volume is and what the interest is in that area or whatever you're working with, it's just different. It's, so, I mean, like I said, I'm fortunate in that I don't have to be overly concerned. I have a husband, he who takes care of our house needs, and anything I do is additional to help. But could I survive on this alone? I don't think so. But that's not the point. It's not what I want, right? It's not what's interesting to me. It's that I started doing this because I care about how dogs turn out. I care about people having dogs, and I want the dogs to stay in the home because, as we all know, the rescue system is broken. The amount of dogs that are out there, there's a bigger need than there are homes, right? And
Yep.
so for me, if I can help a little bit to prevent that from occurring, well, then I'm going to do my darnest for it.
Exactly. Yeah. I same with me, right? I mean, I have a 40-hour a week corporate job, and like thinking about, it's a lot to try and think about quitting to do that, and your financial future, and I don't have a husband to do, it is just me here. So
Right.
it's just it's rough to do it right. It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, and I've got people saying, "Oh, you should increase your prices and so forth." But I guess for me, it's like I don't. Um, yes, yes, I need to make a living. Yes, I need to support myself. Ultimately, if something ever happened, right? But at the same time, it's like if I can afford to do it for less, but yet
Mhm.
reasonable, right? Why wouldn't I? Like, and people are like, "Oh, you should increase your prices," and I'm like, I don't want to rule out those who need the help, right?
Right.
But I'm always kind of, okay, what's your situation? And I do. I'm just, I just can't kick somebody when they're down. I mean, I get it, and I don't want to be taken advantage of either at the same time. But it is something that is, it's important to me. Like the world needs good dogs, right? And if you're going to have a good dog in your life, you need to invest in some of the education for that dog. We do it for kids. So, and yes, they're not the same level and so forth. And I'm not trying to anthropomorphize or anything like that. But at the same time, this is the only being that is the most forgiving and the most like accepting of you, of the version of you that you can ever be, even at your worst of times. So don't we owe them something? And
Hmm.
to me, that's how I look at it. So
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, uh do you have any like videos of anything that you wanted to share? We love you, Lisa. um like just of like a little like snippet of day train, or no?
yeah, I mean, I can pull some stuff up. We always do different things. So, like, and I guess the first thing is like get to know the dog, right? So, when the dog comes, the first time they come to us, we kind of get to know who they are and so forth. And sometimes some of these dogs are dogs that I've done initial lessons with to determine who they are and whether or not the program would be of benefit. Because there's a dog, like, there are dogs that are like, I want to come to day school. And I'm like, okay, let's give it a go. Okay, I inquire about who they are and so forth. And then in some cases, it turns out that it's not an appropriate type of situation for that individual. So it just depends. And ideally, the dogs have to feel comfortable with who's handling them. So we do spend a lot of time figuring out who they are, what their situation is, um, and working towards that based upon the needs of the individual dog. So I'm going to try to pull up. Um, where is it? So we're working on a dog, super excited dog around other dogs. So we're working on, where is it? Sorry, guys.
So, and I'll vamp while you're doing that, right? So, super excited around other dogs, right? Where do you go to do that if you don't know how? Like, that's the really rough part, because you can't go to a class, because let's be fair, we're just putting the dog into the snake pit, right? Where they cannot get away, because a lot of places don't have ginormous rooms for beginner, right? I mean, closest dog's probably at a farthest 8 feet away,
Right.
a lot of the time. So, and some people have gates, some people don't. So you might, I was at one where they packed 17, 18 dogs into maybe a
Right.
20 by 40 room.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy. They were just on top of each other. So, you have dogs that are a little fearful or a little reactive or a little whatever, right? How do you work with that?
Yeah, and so that's kind of what I was going to show. So, and this is kind of an advanced skill, like it takes time, right? And this particular dog that I was what I was referring to, and that I'm going to show a video of, was a very young teenager, and he, private chat. I'm going to send it in private chat if you want to.
Okay.
Sorry,
Got
I
it.
know I'm still terrible at that.
It's okay. Let your techie
Techie
figure
text.
it out.
Techie. So, and this particular dog, he can't come, and he'd been with me for a while, and we were able to. His biggest issue had to do with the fact that he was so interested in other dogs that he had a very difficult time being functional, and so we had to work with him and around other dogs. And so here is, and the other dog that's here, which is the little husky looking guy, he's very friendly with other dogs. So we're working on him paying attention and so forth. The white, big, fluffy guy, and being able to be around other dogs, but not getting overexcited because, even though I can handle him on leash, mom had a difficult time. So for him, we had to do a different type of collar for mom because mom was able to would have a difficult time. But you can see him making really good choices. He's like, all right, I see my friend, and he's played with this dog. Okay. And so I'm like, well, can you handle the presence of another dog? And to me, this is a life skill. Like, can you not get overly excited or exuberant about that dog? And the other guy, Timber, who you've probably seen in a number of videos that we've done, Timber has come, and he is a teenager, but he started out with very specific behaviors because he did a board and train, and then he still comes for supportive type of training and stuff. So the goal was to say, can you be around friends and not care about them? And if you notice, yes, we are using lots of treats, and the reason why we're using lots of treats is because teenagers don't work for free. So, it's like they have to have some motivation. And I think this is the hardest part because most people want to hurry up and get off cookies. But as puppies, you have to reinforce quite a bit as puppies. And then when they turn into teenagers, you have to assess where the dog is and then adjust accordingly, right? Good. And we're working on the let's go. But he did really well. It took him a bit to figure this piece out.
Right, because most dogs get a let's go, and what does that mean? Let's go play with our friend, right?
Right.
It's hard to
The
make that
launcher.
transition.
Yeah. So we started talking about what to do and how to handle that with their owners and stuff.
So definitely just not just leash training or this or that. It's a lot of skill building.
Right. Skills, right? Can you split attention? And then different skills. And so we're working on like a list, if you will, like of different skills that people, but we don't work on, like sit and down are givens, if that makes sense. Like,
sure.
To me, life skills have more to do with, can you split attention?
Right.
Can you settle in this environment? Nice. Hello, Mom.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Get a Vishli. This is what they do.
Right. And then coming when called is a big deal. Follow me, leash walking. So those things are really stuff. If you start soon, early on in their training, they do a really good job of it. Like they figure stuff out because if you're consistent with it, like I had a couple come today with what is he, like 3 months-ish old little pup, and and I don't live by tons of traffic. So like I have some benefit, right? Where I can have the dogs loose or drag a leash and they get to make good choices and stuff like that. And I think it's more choices, right? So like to me, choices are, what if I give you this option? What are you going to choose? What if I say this behavior pays off really well for you? Are you willing to repeat that behavior? So in this particular situation with this dog, this puppy, we were able to get within minutes him to understand, oh, I should follow you. Yeah. What does that translate to? Loose leash walking, come when called, all those things, right? And those to me are life skills. It's not It's not about belting out commands and the dog's responding to them, because that's not who I am. I'm like, well, let's see what good choice you make there, right? And that's how I am, because I don't want to micromanage everything. But that's how I train.
Well, and let's be fair. As a young dog, splitting attention, managing arousal, right? And following you, making you important. I mean, if you have those skills, the rest is a breeze.
Yes.
But you have to keep up at it. It's not
Right.
just one and done. Although, I think one of the super interesting things that we learned when we were at the Resilience Rainbow Seminar with Dr. Kathy
Yeah.
Murphy was, understanding that when you put that super good foundation on them as puppies, adolescence sucks. And
But
basically,
not as bad.
but not as bad, right? But then she also said sometimes you just have to ride out that storm of the 18 months, and all those things that you put on them on that good foundation as puppies comes back.
Yes.
Like they don't lose it even when they're dum-dums.
Right.
So I found that really interesting that, you can go 18 months where they're just like, I don't remember anything and I'm going to test you. And I'm not listening. And all of a sudden, right, when all those hormones kind of calm down and the brain stops firing off random, pieces of information and they can get control of their bodies again, right, that stuff starts coming back.
Right. And I think that's the piece that in training as teenagers we miss. It's not my favorite part of training by no stretch of the imagination, because they're so full of emotion about this or that, or, things I don't understand, but that's okay. And I think that what's important is, that's why I'm like, give me the puppy, we'll install good situations and good choices in that time. And then when they become teenagers, they have a fallback, but you'll have to kind of go back to, like, it's temporary, right? It's not forever. And that's what I think people feel like, what happened to my puppy? I'm like, don't sweat it. It'll come back.
Right.
You put a lot of good work into it and trust it. But I do agree with that. And I think, but what makes me insane about training with teenagers and stuff is that people don't understand this is truly a phase, and biologically they have no control over it, right? So we have to put our patience hat on and sort through it. And it's not my favorite time, but I'm like, okay, well, you're having a moment and we'll sort it, right?
Yep. It's like, what are you crying about? I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know why I did that. So yeah, it's really rough. So this too shall pass. That's the adolescence piece.
Right. Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us tonight. I know we kind of roll off on some of these topics here into multiple things, but it's near and dear to our hearts. And I'm so glad that Lisa has a life where she can offer something like this. I wish I lived closer, because I would absolutely push all my dogs over there when they were young, but I'll pay double. Can I have a spot? So he's a little too far away from me though, but
and ultimately I think the takeaway from this is that it takes time to grow a dog, right? So that the Lorax, the movie, the song that comes to mind is Let It Grow, right? Yeah. And I keep thinking of that. I'm like, okay, let it grow. It just needs time, and I think once we realize that and we give ourselves and the dogs grace, it's a little easier to swallow until okay, this is not forever.
Yeah, exactly. Sue says working all those life skills over and over, and I'll even add some over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, right? Riding out the storm at almost 2.5 years old, my patience has been tested. Amen, sister. We're all with you. So
right.
my youngest is now 2, so thankfully I'm almost through. So
right.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Glad to have you join us tonight.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.